This video covers chords beyond the majors and the minors and will include diminished chords, augmented chords, and seventh chords. Hope you enjoy my cat singing along. Remember the major chord, the major triad. There's a major triad and a minor triad, a minor third, to create what we call the major triad. The minor triad is comprised of two thirds, a minor third, a major third, to give you the minor triad. The next chord is a diminished chord, where we take a step and a half between each of the notes. So there's the C, step and a half is up, so we're lowering the fifth from the minor, and we can add this one a step and a half, and so we get bum, 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 bum. Note that each of these notes are exactly a step and a half apart, and they just keep repeating. The result is there are only 3 diminished chords. The rest of them are inversions of those 3, and you can see that as you move up the scale. Those are the 3. After this, we have the same diminished chord, because this pattern every step and a half repeats all the way up the keyboard as the first diminished chord that we did. So we have 3 diminished chords. The next chord, besides, and that's like the diminished in a way, is you take the major triad and you raise the fifth or lower the sixth, depending on how people want to write it. This is called the augmented chord. Beautiful sound, isn't it? Just makes you want to go to F. Okay, we go back to the augmented chord, and note there are 2 steps in this interval and 2 steps in that interval, and look, 2 more steps up to the C, and so it's a perfect match for the octave. So just like in the diminished chord was a perfect match for the octave, where you started out with the step and a half, step and a half, step and a half, you ended up on the octave. Now you go 2 steps, and you end up on the octave. In this case, there are only 4 different augmented chords, and the rest of them are inversions of one of those 4. So for example, the next augmented chord, 2 steps up. And then we start repeating again. And you can see as you go up the piano, everything will be an inversion of one of those 4 chords. So there we have the major, the minor, the diminished, and the augmented. Those are the basic chords, and now we're going to do an add-on. So we have the basic triad plus a note. The first and easiest note to add, and we can add the same 3 notes to any of these chords, and we'll have a second part of the name of the chord. For example, here's the C major. That's the C major octave. If we want to do now something called the Cmaj 7th chord, we lower the octave note a half a step. So that's the Maj, the C major, Maj 7th. We can lower the 7th a full step from C to B flat. Now we have what's called the dominant 7th. So there's the octave, the Maj 7th, and the dominant 7th. Same thing applies true for the minor chord, minor triad. We have the octave, we have the minor, this is called a minor Maj 7th, or some people just say, because it sounds cool, the minor major 7th. And then we have the regular minor 7th, or minor, I want to call it dominant 7th, but they just say minor 7th. So we have, and then we have the diminished chord. Usually people play a triad, but then you can play the 4th. So that's one note you can add, and instead of adding the octave on top of that, it's just too many notes, you could do that. You add the dominant 7th, so this is a half, it's called a, oh boy, mixed up here. Half diminished, because you have a step and a half, and a full step. It's called the half diminished, and this is the full diminished. You can see the half diminished is really the dominant 7th diminished, but they don't call it that way. They just call this the half diminished, because you're halfway from halfway either up from the A or down away from the A, which is the true diminished quadrad or tetrad or whatever you want to call it. So those are the basic notes and the scales and the keys. Every key has its own set, but there's always only 3 diminished chords and 4 augmented chords, no matter what key you're in. And they're all pretty much, once you learn them once, you can put them in any key and they'll come up again in that key.